Despite Korea's remarkable success, rising from ruins of the Korean War, a national tragedy still persists. We're yet to reunite divided Korea and divided families. Recently, though, there was a family reunion event held for the separated families from the Korean War, the first in about 20 months. On today's Upfront at the Korean War Memorial, Upfront discusses the significance of the event and also how we can build from this small progress towards a peaceful Korean unification.
Long, sorrowful years. That was how long it took for them to see each other again, just to hold each other's hands once more. Korea was liberated from Japan in 1945, when the Second World War ended. However, the Korean peninsula was divided along the 38th parallel. A vast number of families were separated after the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950. According to estimates, there are about 10 million people separated from their families. It was a great calamity. No one could understand the heartbreak of people torn away from their families overnight. Thus, the Korean government started a special broadcast to help divided families in the South find each other. The broadcast scenes of separated families hugging each other and crying acted as a catalyst for the first reunion of separated families in the two Koreas. On September 1985, the two Koreas exchanged members of separated families and performance groups in visits to Seoul and Pyongyang. A second visit was discussed, but never came into being. This continued until 2000, 15 years after the first visit by separated families. This was the year of the June 15 South-North Joint Declaration, in which the two Koreas agreed to hold reunions for separated families. Finally, the historic first reunion of the separated families took place. However, the chance was given to a lucky few. From 1988 until July of this year, about 130,000 people have applied to participate in reunion events, but about 60,000, or 49% of the total, have passed away. Only 1,950, just 1.5% of all applicants, were able to meet their families through the 19 reunion events held so far. The first inter-Korean video conference reunion was held on August 15, 2005, to expand the opportunity for aging family members. However, these events only took place 7 times and remain suspended until today. Ordinary reunions were also suspended for about 3 years and 7 months after North Korea's attack on Yeonpyeong Island in late 2010. They were only resumed after President Park Chan-bong took office. There has always been uncertainty in the reunion of separated families due to fluctuating inter-Korean politics. Now is time to create institutions for regularly scheduled reunions if we truly care about the fervent hopes of aging families.
This kind of reunion event is always an emotional one, but emotions aside, this has a great importance as to when we contemplate the ultimate challenge that Korea has, which is a reunification of Koreas. To talk about this issue, we have 2 great expert guests here. We're joined by Park Chan-bong, Secretary General of National Unification Advisory Council, which is a presidential advisory body on policies of peaceful unification.
Pleasure to be here.
And we have Professor Ho-yeol, a professor of North Korean Studies at Korea University. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Dr. Park, let's talk about the reunion itself that happened in October 20th to 26th. And this is the 20th such meeting, but when we go back to 19th, that's last year, and we go back to 18th, we go all the way back to 2010. So this arguably is a great advancement in terms of reunion events. How do you see the significance of it?
Well, I would like to say two things. On the one hand, it is very much encouraging for us to see the two Koreas coming to terms in holding the reunion event in Kumgang Mountain area. Particularly considering the fact that there was a rising tension between the two Koreas caused by the planting of North Korean landmines, which wounded several South Korean soldiers. On the other hand, I am also sobered by the realization that the reunion event is falling far short of our expectations. Especially when we recognize the number of separated families who applied for the reunion. In the South, there are more than 60,000 Korean separated families who applied for the reunion, but only 100 of more than 60,000 were chosen to participate in this event. So it is far short of our expectation. Furthermore, we still hope that this family reunion event will lead to further reconciliation between the two Koreas. That is something we will have to wait and see.
Right. How did you see it? Professor, there are only about 100 families that got together, and even though we had 20 of these events, considering there are over 60,000 remaining, but when we started there were over 100,000 families who are really wanting to get together. But do you see the improvement in the conditions?
Well, I think it's not enough, but if I say it's an improvement of inter-Korean relations, because over the last 65 years, North Korea didn't allow their people to meet and conform the life and death of their separate family members. That's the reality of the separation and division on the Korean peninsula. And therefore, since 2000, we had 20 this kind of a reunion of separate family. The number is very limited, but I think that is a new signal for us to see they could meet and find out whether their separate family members live or not. So I think it's fundamental right for everyone in the world that they should find out their separate family. Right. So I think it's a kind of improvement both North and South Koreas to allow their people to meet their family members, and I think it's a kind of achievement over the last 15 years.
Right. I saw the events, and it's an intensely emotional one.
Right.
And the lost families getting together, and let's just say that I had a box of tissues beside me when I was watching it. But in light of this difficulties and tragic situation that our government has been, I know, trying to address, what is our government's ongoing efforts? I know that the Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn also mentioned that this has to go on, but what are some specific steps that the Korean government is taking?
Well, actually, the separated family issue is a very urgent issue, not only from the perspective of separate families themselves, but at the same time for the development of inter-Korean relations and finally achieving Korean unification. It is widely known that there are more than 10 million separated families in the South only. Because when North Koreans came to the South at the time of Korean liberation and at the time of Korean War, the number was around more than 1 million, but the number increased up until today to the level of 10 million.
I see.
And among the 10 million separate families, the number who applied for the reunion is in the number of around 65,000.
Right.
So this is a very urgent and significant issue to be resolved. And when we talk about resolving the separate family reunion issue, we can think of 4 steps to fully resolve it. The first is to share the information about the separated families on the other side, whether they are still alive or dead, or where do they live, so forth. Knowing the whereabouts of the separate families, that's the first step to start. And then we can think of the second step, which is the exchange of letters between the separate families. The third is the reunion of the separate families face to face, like the one we have at the Kumgang Mountain today.
Right.
The first and the final step would be to reunite the family and settle down in a place where they choose. These are the steps to be taken in resolving the separate family reunion issue. Among the 4 steps, what the Park Geun-hye administration of the Republic of Korea is focusing on is to resolve the separate family issue from the first step. In other words, the Republic of Korea is looking for the resolution of the separate family issue by providing the informations about the whereabouts of all the separate families. So we have 65,000 separate families who applied for the reunion.
Right.
So if we provide the North with the list of the applicants, then we can ask North Korea to provide the whereabouts of the separate families remaining in the North Korean side. Then they will be able to learn that whether their loved ones are still alive or dead or so forth.
I see. Now, can we contrast that with other efforts that they were doing? For example, Kaesong Economic Zone. That has been going on, although there was an interruption once, but it does seem like it's going on much more robustly than there's a humanitarian need. Do you see the difference between these 2 efforts? Although, if you look at the interactions between them, do they both face the same kind of challenges, same kind of arbitrary or sometimes very sudden provocations from the North?
Well, I think inter-Korean relations is very unique. Sometimes it might be regarded as very strange to foreigners, because for instance, we approach reunion of separate families as a humanitarian issue. However, North Koreans deal with it in a very political issue.
I see.
And therefore, there's a different interest between the 2 sides. And also, the Kaesong Special Economic Zones, we assume the Kaesong Special Economic Zone is a kind of cooperation between the 2 sides for getting a benefit for both sides.
Right.
However, North Korea thinks that they try to make a bargain or deal with South Korea by using that kind of a special economic zone. So there are always conflict and tensions over many various issues on that particular zones or particular areas. But may I add to something that the urgency of a separate family issue is that we had about 130 applicants from South Korea to meet their separate family in the north. But over the last 15 years, only 2,000 South Koreans succeeded to meet their separate families. However, they are now getting older.
Right.
And therefore, almost half of those applicants from South Korea already passed away. So I think if North Korea really consider this is kind of a humanitarian issue, then they should be more cooperate to find out and to work together to achieve their final dreams to meet their families before they die.
Let's take a look at what happened in the reunion events. We prepared a video report on the reunion itself that happened in 20th to 26th. Let's take a look. Now, one of the things that we didn't talk about probably is the sentiment or the sympathy that we see from international community. One of the things that I think is a good news, that our archived, the reunion footage was listed as a UNESCO's documentary heritage. Now, does that mean that we're getting some support from international community? How do you take that,
Well, I think it's a very emotional and very historic moment. Not just for Koreans, but for the human beings in the world. It's a kind of a basic or fundamental right to meet their separate family members. And therefore, if we get this kind of a document as a human being's record, then I think the worldwide support or intention or attention might be focused on the issues on the Korean Peninsula, particularly on the reunion of separate family members.
At least the awareness.
Of course, and therefore the
the
international community, including US and China or other countries, will support if they can. And there are some Koreans overseas living in China and US, and therefore I think this kind of media attention or the international community's effort to pay attention to this kind of effort by South Koreans or Koreans, and I think it's a great help for us.
I see. Dr. Park, you mentioned before that this reunion event happened amidst of a lot of challenges, and a lot of experts were not sure whether this would take place at all because of the rocket launch, the provocations, and there are different kinds of things happening, including the U.S.-Korea summit, which North Korea has sensitively responded. And in particular, let's focus on the rocket launch. And it seemed like they were going to do it, but then they didn't at this point. Is that the reflection of the intention or the good intention that North Korea has to improve the inter-Korean relationship? Or is there other reasons? How do you see that?
Well, I think it is premature for us to conclude whether North Korea will eventually launch or not. But when we look back, when North Korea celebrated its 70th anniversary of North Korean Workers' Party establishment, North Korea didn't launch at the time the missile many experts expected. Why is that? I think Kim Jong-un of North Korea had to make a choice. One was to launch the missile, but without the Chinese endorsement of the anniversary. As we could see, China sent a delegation headed by the number 5 ranking official from the Chinese Communist Party. So if North Korea launched the missile before the anniversary, China would not have sent the Chinese delegation. So Kim Jong-un has to have the ceremony without the Chinese delegation.
Right.
So, but because North Korea did not launch the missile, China could send the Communist Party delegation to North Korean anniversary. So Kim Jong-un made a choice to have the anniversary event with the endorsement of the Chinese delegation, rather than launching the missile, but without the Chinese delegation.
I see. Professor Yu, how do you see that? And of course, there is a little bit of intervention from China, and probably they were influenced by that. But does that essentially just delay the launch, or is there other reasons for Kim Jong-un? I guess the focus is whether there is a genuine change in North Korean policies towards this unification or inter-Korean relationship.
I think it's too early for us to decide whether North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un decide not to launch a long-range missile. But technically, I think they might delay, or they might consider another opportunity to get their goals. Well, first of all, I think the missile and nuclear weapon is the ultimate weapons for them to survive or to protect their regime from outside. And therefore, I think they would not give up those kind of too powerful weaponry to defend. And therefore, I think at this time, there are a lot of reasons for them not to launch by celebrating their 70th anniversary. As Dr. Park mentioned, that Chinese influence or Chinese intervention might help the world to see North Korea not to make any provocation this time. But if North Korean leader or North Korean regime calculate that it might help their own goal to launch missile, I think they could decide to launch.
How do you see the result of the recent visit of President Park to the White House and the summit meetings, in which it was eminently clear that the U.S. and Korea is making one voice, the nuclear program in North Korea, and there is a offer of humanitarian aid and other cooperations. But North Korea seemed to respond in a very nervous and maybe very hysterical manner. How did you see that?
Well, you know, frankly, if I were a North Korean leader, I could find some positive elements from the joint statement by the President Park Geun-hye and President Obama, because the two leaders declared in the joint statement that they do not have any intention to be hostile about North Korea, and they are prepared to cooperate with North Korea in resolving North Korean nuclear issue peacefully through the dialogue process. So, if North Korea is serious about its future and resolving problem North Korea faces today domestically, like the economic difficulties, food shortage, human rights violations, and the North Korean defectors. Well, you name it. If you are prepared to resolve all these problems, it is time for North Korea to pay sincere attention to what the joint statement says, and North Korea has to come forward to cooperate with the international community, first of all, in resolving the nuclear program.
There were some the activities that might give North Korea some ideas. For example, a recent naval review of South Korea, which featured a nuclear aircraft carrier. And also there is a UN resolution on the human rights situation in the North Korea. Now, I'm sure these provokes it profoundly to North Korean leadership, but do they come out with the thinking that this is the international community forming kind of one voice and opinion about what their future action should be, or would they just think of these as provocations?
Well, I think without pressure from outside, any totalitarian regime cannot be changed. That's a kind of historical lesson. And therefore, I think it's important for us and also international community to make one voice. Because North Korean regime right now it's not a kind of a normal kind of a situation. And therefore, if North Korea really want to survive, and they think the change and reform or opening is inevitable for their own future, and we would provide some environment or some opportunity for them to change by their own speed, by their own ways, to maintain their own order. It's a kind of a good opportunity for them to take. And that is the way how to persuade North Korean leadership.
I see.
So I think if North Koreans calculate it very rational way, I think it's a very right time. And also Chinese and Russians are also very friendly neighbors to North Korea, and therefore I think it's time for North Korea to take.
We again resort to North Koreans' rational decision,
Sure.
which we have been disappointed before, but this time it might be different. But the difference they're showing, it might be one of the things could be that they released a Korean student who has been detained in North Korea, Ju. Now, the releasing of Ju, do you take that as one of the gestures or the change of directions, indication that North Korea is changing?
Frankly, I do not attach too much significance to it because North Korea is still holding 3 more South Koreans with the charge of espionage. If North Korea releases all the other 3 South Koreans, I would say that it means something. But without that, I think we will have to wait until North Korea releases the remaining South Koreans detained by the North.
I see. So there is a little bit of not very conclusive at this point.
And there are some kind of political calculation for North Korea decide to release this Korean or Korean American young student to the south. He already mentioned that he is a student who want to look at North Korean society, and therefore I think there is absolutely no reason for North Korea to detain him for so long time. And also he made some interview with the CNN, and therefore international community, also the US, pay attention to what happened on the young man's destiny, whatever. And therefore North Korea decided a kind of political calculation. Also, North Korea is now trying to have dialogue with the US, and therefore it's kind of a way for them to give some gestures to have dialogue with the US.
I see. Let's revisit what you mentioned before about how our approach of humanitarian side and political side is taken a little bit differently by the North Korea. But our government seems to take this two-track approach, apparently. One in the humanitarian side, which is different from the political approach that they're taking. Now, as you mentioned before, do you think it is effective to take those different approaches to North Korea?
Well, I think that the dual, separate approach is not easy, even though we want to think that political and economic and humanitarian in different ways. Because, as I mentioned, the humanitarian issue like reunion of separate family issue is very urgent. And therefore, we want to continue, regardless of political dimensions, like North Korea's provocations and other tensions over the Korean peninsula between the sides. And that's our approach to separate. However, I think it's not possible to totally separate all those issues on the Korean peninsula. That's our own historical lessons.
I see.
Of course, we will try to resolve both humanitarian and security related issues altogether. But because of the urgency of the humanitarian issue, it is true that we put more emphasis in resolving this humanitarian issue in inter-Korean relations. When we talk about humanitarian issues, we can think of various sub-agendas like separate family issues and humanitarian assistance to North Korea,
Right.
like food assistance and medical assistance, so forth. We also have to consider the political prisoners encamped in North Korean gulags.
I see.
And the first element of humanitarian issue is to stop the repatriation of North Korean defectors from outside of North Korea, like China or other parts of the world. So when we deal with this kind of humanitarian issues, that has to, the humanitarian issue itself involves the life and death situation of those who are involved. So without our support, there is no way for them to be saved from North Korean operation.
I see.
So the humanitarian assistance is very urgent issue. We would like to emphasize more in resolving these problems, but as Professor Yu just said, the two humanitarian issue and security issue and the economic issues, these issues are interrelated with
right.
each other. So even though we would like to see a more rapid progress in humanitarian problems, our expectations cannot be easily met because they are so interrelated with each other.
I see. I guess the complication has made this process very tedious and sometimes very varied in terms of their twists and turns. But from the North Korea's point of view and our point of view as well, I guess the next step might be that the sanctions, the May 24th measures that we have taken in light of the Cheonan provocation and also economic sanctions that followed it, that should be resolved at some point if this progresses. And also another track might be the Kumgang Tour project, which in my mind is in some ways kind of extension or the next step of the Kaesong economic cooperation. And we have a lot of other projects that we can think of. Do you think that our present course of humanitarian releasing of Jew and reunion, they kind of indicate, if you kind of project into the future, that might happen?
Yeah, of course. I think according to the August 25th agreement between the two sides, they agreed to have at least 3 more future agenda. The first one is the reunion of separate families, and another one is the exchange of civilian level cooperation between the two sides. And the most important agreement between the two sides is to hold a official level dialogue. And if we could have the official dialogue, then we could talk about how to resolve the May 21st measurement. That we had already made conditions how to resolve, how to lift the 24th sanction against North Korea, such as the apologies and not to repeat such kind of provocations. These kind of things that we can talk with North Korean counterpart if we have this kind of official dialogue. And therefore, I think after the reunion of separate families in Kumgang Mountain, then we could continue dialogue in an official level, and we can touch upon various issues, including May 21st measurement, and also we can talk about how to resolve the Kumgang Mountain tourism, because Kumgang Mountain tourism is another issue between the two sides. And this time we had the reunion held in Kumgang Mountain. So I think there's some kind of similarity.
Kind of subtext built into that.
Exactly.
Right.
So I hope and expect to continue our dialogue.
I see. We'd like to kind of look into the future a little bit, but before we do that, let's take a look at the report on the process of making these reunions and the significance of it. Let's take a look.
The 20th reunion event for separated families commenced on October 20th at Mount Kumgang. How this reunion of 186 separated family members from the two Koreas came into being can be traced back to August. On August 4th, two South Korean soldiers lost their legs to a landmine planted by the North Korean army near the DMZ. Seoul strongly condemned Pyongyang for the provocation and resumed propaganda broadcasts to the North Korean border in response.
The striking turn of events highlight
tensions between the two Koreas reached a peak as Seoul and Pyongyang both declared maximum alert and a quasi-state of war. Finally, the two Koreas agreed to hold high-level talks right before the deadline of Pyongyang's ultimatum. High-level talks between the two Koreas took place on August 22nd at the Peace House in Panmunjom. The discussion was of unprecedented length, lasting 43 straight hours over 4 days. An agreement was finally reached on August 25th. This agreement included the North's expression of regret about the landmine provocation and the South's suspension of propaganda broadcasts. It also included the arranging of a reunion event for separated families.
South and North Korea agreed to hold a new round of reunions of separated families after the Chuseok holiday, as well as Red Cross working level talks at the beginning of September to discuss ways to hold regular reunions.
And on October 20th, the two Koreas finally held a reunion of separated families, despite a number of risks, including the North's possible rocket launch and military parade to commemorate the 70th anniversary of its ruling Workers' Party. Seoul and Pyongyang have turned crisis into opportunity in creating this reunion event. This is why hopes are growing for the event to become the first step towards the peaceful unification of the Korean peninsula.
Let's turn to the kind of last segment, which is the most important one. They're looking into the future. And I think you would agree that all these developments have a kind of final point, which is a unification of Koreas. So our focus is on whether these developments are building up to that or becoming an impediment. On that point, I think that the one point that we can focus on is August 25th, when four leaders of North Korea and South Korea got together. Kim Kwan-jin, National Security Advisor, and Unification Minister Hong Young-pyo, and on the north side, the Kim Yang-gon, the Secretary of the Central Committee of Workers' Party, and also Hwang Byung-seo, the top military aide. Those are the recognizable names who can be a decisive factor in the making decisions. So they got together and had the 4 days of intense discussions, and they say that they hardly got any sleep during those. Other than the reunion, there were other agreements made. Can you kind of comment on what kind of agreements have made to begin with?
The first thing we come to notice in the joint statement is that the two sides agreed to have authoritarian inter-Korean dialogues to discuss various issues between the two sides. And it also made it clear that North Korea expressed its regret about what happened in the DMZ area, apparently indicating the landmine which wounded several South Korean soldiers.
Right.
At the same time, the Republic of Korea and the South agreed that we will withhold the broadcast of the loudspeakers in the DMZ area. And North Korea also agreed to withhold raising tensions in the area. So these are kind of agreements the two Koreas could agree upon. in a sense, these agreements can indicate that we are opening a new phase of inter-Korean relations that can possibly lead to peaceful unification. That's something we have to wait and see in the future. But I hope that after we conclude the reunion event in Kumgangsan area, I hope that the Republic of Korea will make a proposal to North Korea to have this kind of inter-Korean official dialogue to discuss various issues. The situation is not very much pessimistic. So if North Korea responds positively, then I think we can discuss various issues, including the May 24th measure, that is the policy the Republic of Korea took in response to North Korean sinking of a South Korean war vessel in the West Sea.
Right.
In that measure, South Korea made sure that we are withholding any further inter-Korean deals that can provide benefits to North Korean side. So if North Korea promises not to repeat the kind of provocation to the south, like the sinking of a warship in the West Sea, planting landmines in the DMZ, and killing South Korean tourists in Kumgangsan mountain tourism area, so forth. If North Korea stops, or North Korea shows any sign that they are prepared to stop any further provocations against the South, the South is fully prepared to cooperate with North Korea to begin the process of improving inter-Korean relations.
Yeah, the message has been pretty clear, I think. But Professor, you not only the agreements of reunion, and as Dr. Park mentioned, there were some partnerships they're forming, especially in the private sector as well.
Yeah.
So arguably, the sphere of cooperation is broadening and intensifying. But in a short term, do you think that this would potentially lead to the Pyongyang-Seoul summit? And if that happens, probably this would be a big milestone.
Yeah. I think it's pretty much early to say that we are going to have a summit between our President Park Geun-hye and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. However, I think when we reach the August 25th agreement, I think it's a kind of a dialogue or a kind of a meeting between top leaders or between the two sides. I think it's a kind of indirect summit between the two sides over very critical issues. Well, at the time, the tensions on the Korean peninsula is very high, and therefore only the top leader could decide whether they continue to this kind of dialogue or they decide to some kind of military options. And therefore, if we achieve agreement, then I think both leaders had kind of exchanged their views to continue dialogue. And therefore, if North Korea abide by the agreement, and not just the agreement itself, but if they continue to their genuine sincerity to work together in a positive or constructive ways to resolve those kind of issues that both North and South Korea agree, then I think it's a kind of a stepping stone for us to expect a further development and further dialogue, and summit is a kind of ultimate chance for both sides to make a kind of positive relationship between them.
Right. In light of what happened around that time, the having an agreement itself was a great feat.
Yeah, both sides already mentioned that they would not neglect to not to have a summit. North Korean leader already mentioned in the New Year message, and our president repeated that summit is a kind of one of the options that we can have.
I see. Dr. Park, one of the models that we have is German unification. And recently, German President Joachim Gauck has visited Korea. In his tour of some countries to express his remorse on what the Nazi Germany has done. Now, what would be the message that he might have for Korean situation at this point?
I think the first message you can get from President Gaok's visit to Korea is that Germany made a success in unification. As we all know, German Chancellor Merkel is also originally from East Germany.
East Germany, right.
German President Gauck is also originally from East Germany. That means that German integration between East and West Germany is now complete. So the other element we can learn from Mr. Gauck's visit to Korea is that the success of German unification can serve as a model for Korean unification. Germany and Korea were both divided by the Cold War confrontation after the World War II.
Right.
But many experts expected that Korean unification would come earlier than German unification.
I see.
Because Germany was divided by the international treaty. Because Germany was responsible for the World Wars I and II. So the international community shared the interest to divide the Germany, not to repeat the kind of disaster caused by German invasion in neighboring countries. But on the other hand, Koreans never experienced any invasion in neighboring countries. Korea had only to suffer from the international circumstances. We had to fall in the imperial imperialism of Japanese control.
Japanese occupation.
And then after liberation, we have been suffering the national division for more than 7 decades.
Right.
So it is time for Korea to be unified. And Germany can serve as a good model for Korean unification.
I see. One of the models that we look to is what is called a Freikauf, which is a kind of model where Germany kind of bought the freedom of the political detainees in East Germany, and that resulted in 34,000 freed prisoners and reunion of 250,000 separate families. So that has an implication to the reunion that we are talking about, but also towards a reunification. Now, some say, but it's a different situation that Korea has than Germany. Is that a good model, do you think?
Well, it could be a model to buy freedom. Well, for instance, for Korean cases, we had the Korean War prisoners by North Korea. Well, when we made treaty between the two sides, we could not resolve those kind of detainees or war prisoners completely. And therefore, right now, we confirm that at least more than 500 South Korean soldiers detained by North Korea. And then we can apply this kind of a Freikauf to North Korea, that we could take them back to South Korea and by paying, but not in cash, but in other materials.
I see.
And also we have a hundred of thousands abductees by North Korea during the Korean War. We now investigate, examine how many South Korean abductees living in North Korea, and then we can apply this kind of a Freikauf to North Korea, that we would want to take them back. And also there are some political prisoners detained in North Korea's prisoners camp, and therefore we can take them if North Korea cooperate with us. But it's not easy, but we can apply the German model.
I see. Well, we're almost out of time, but as a last comment, I'd like to ask you to kind of think about the advices that we can, to the government, and it could be North Korea as well, in order to achieve unification. I think that's what we all want. Let's just talk.
I think we have at least three major issues that we should pay more attention to achieve or prepare the unification. The first one is that we made some kind of domestic consensus about the unification. We do not worry about unification costs if there are some costs that we might pay. So we are going to prepare regardless of the cost, regardless of burdens. That's our consensus one. And the second one is we would like to extend our cooperative environment to support and assist our unification effort by neighboring countries, including international community. Without support or help, I think it's very difficult for us to expect unification. And the third one is without change and opening inside North Korea, I think it's almost impossible for us to think about peaceful and free democratic type of unification on the Korean Peninsula. So I think we should pay more attention and patience and also consistency on unification policy. I
see. Dr. Park, you have the briefly last word.
As we have already discussed, the Korean division, over which the separate families is only part of the issue. Is the legacy of the international Cold War confrontation. But you know, the Cold War confrontation in the international level has been resolved more than 20 years ago. So it is very high time that the legacy of Cold War confrontation on the Korean Peninsula should be resolved. And it is time for Korea to be unified. For the Korean unification, of course, as Professor Yu said, it is for Koreans to achieve, but it needs international support. And as President Park already said, Korean unification will be a bonanza, not only for Koreans in the south and in the north, but also for the international community as a whole, because the unified Korea will serve as a facilitator of peace and prosperity, not only in Northeast Asia, but also in Eurasia and all over the world. So the international community has every reason to support the Korean unification. And the Koreans are required to make more efforts to prepare and achieve unification.
I see. Dr. Park, Professor Yu, thank you for your contribution today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
These separated families waited for 70 years to embrace their family members again, and many have passed away without achieving their dreams. I hope that this kind of reunions will continue often and regularly, and also that will provide a much needed foundation, small steps towards the big prize of reunification. And Korea has an opportunity to take a leadership role to decide its own fate towards that goal. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.